We're removing you from your post after 17 years, Arthur. Marcus Bench, my supervisor, said bluntly and without emotion. The remarks lingered in his excessively modern office's sterile atmosphere. Clean out your desk by the end of the day. His eyes were far away, already shifting to his next assignment. I'm Arthur Morgan, and I'm 54 years old. I was the senior infrastructure engineer at OmniCorp Solutions in Denver, Colorado, until that particular Monday morning. I had been the unrecognized backbone of the IT department for nearly 20 years. I had led us through the airy promise of cloud migration, leaving behind the shrieking symphony of dial-up days. While I was still there, 3 CEOs had gone through the rotating door. I stayed, carefully recovering every seemingly lost file and gently teaching every anxious new hire. For the silent dedication I put into my career, I toiled through innumerable weekends and holidays without ever requesting a promotion or even a simple pat on the back. The quiet hum of the systems I kept up was my reward. I knew, therefore, when Marcus called me into his office and I saw HR's Isabella Rossi sitting there, her face carefully neutral. Even before he opened his mouth to say the practiced lines, I knew. Weeks ago, the typical camaraderie in the department had given way to a slight frost. I managed to give a single, abrupt nod. I understand completely, I said. In my ears, my own speech sounded strangely serene. The sterile declarations hung behind me as I left without saying another word. There was only a somber, silent acceptance of the inevitable, no outburst of rage or frantic pleas. The usual room at my workstation felt strange all of a sudden. I saw younger workers look at me, their features lit by the light from their monitors. For a brief moment, their gazes locked with mine before swiftly returning to their displays. In the corporate world, news spreads brutally efficiently. The majority of them were intelligent children I had groomed myself to be software developers. They were good kids, sincere and motivated, but they didn't really understand what was genuinely ingrained in our processes. The strata of the ancient architecture, which I had meticulously preserved, were incomprehensible to them. The proprietary program I had painstakingly created years ago was incomprehensible to all of them. Additionally, they were unable to locate the administrative credentials, a fail-safe ID that was put in place a long time ago, buried 3 layers deep in each crucial system. I started to pack my personal belongings into a battered cardboard box in a methodical, almost robotic manner. A framed picture of Ella Laner and our son from a Rockies hike, grinning back at me. My son made this slightly crooked coffee mug in a high school pottery class. A cherished artifact. A silent tribute to persistence was the little, hardy cactus that had managed to endure 17 years of the harsh fluorescent lights. Under that same unforgiving lighting, Chloe Davis from marketing stopped by my cubicle. Her usually cheerful face was tight with genuine concern. "Arthur, I just heard," she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. "This is ridiculous. You practically built the digital foundations of this place." I offered a small, weary shrug, the gesture feeling heavy. "Companies change direction, Chloe." My voice was low, steady. "But without any warning? After everything you've done for OmniCorp?" Her voice was rising slightly, tinged with indignation, drawing unwelcome attention from nearby desks. "It's fine," I said quietly, meeting her gaze. Really, it wasn't fine. Not even close. A cold knot of resentment was tightening in my chest, but I wasn't going to make a scene. Dignity was the only thing they couldn't take from me. As I was leaving, box in hand, Marcus stepped out of his office. He didn't offer a goodbye, no conciliatory handshake, not even a forced pleasantry, just silent surveillance, his eyes following me down the hallway, ensuring I actually left the premises. It felt like being escorted off the property like a common thief. What none of them, not Marcus, not Isabella, not the executives upstairs, had bothered to pay attention to over the years was the simple fact that I had become the most critical single point of knowledge in the entire building. Not because I considered myself exceptional, but because I was relentlessly thorough. I documented everything, every change, every patch, every workaround. Years ago, during a minor data breach scare, the legal team had requested enhanced security measures. So I set up secure audit protocols to meticulously track any unauthorized access attempts. They had approved it, lauded the initiative briefly, and then promptly forgotten about the depth of the system. I also had copies, encrypted and secured, stored off-site. One set was currently in my car. Sitting in my aging but reliable sedan in the vast parking lot, I paused for a moment. I looked back at the imposing 12-story glass and steel building where I'd spent the vast majority of my adult life. The security badge I had just surrendered, now deactivated, had been renewed 16 times. 16 years of early mornings, late nights, and quiet dedication. I started the engine, the familiar rumble a small comfort. I drove home through the familiar Denver streets, the mountains a hazy silhouette in the distance. They had absolutely no idea what they had just done. Wednesday, I thought with a flicker of grim satisfaction, would be interesting. I'd been with Omnicorp since it was just 2 rented floors in a nondescript business park on the outskirts of Denver. I started when my son, now finishing grad school and charting his own course, was barely in kindergarten. The company grew exponentially, and I grew with it, my skills evolving alongside the technology. I'd turned down lucrative offers from competitors over the years, tempting proposals that promised more money, more prestige. But loyalty mattered to me then. I believed in building something lasting. My wife, Ella Lehner, used to joke with a hint of affectionate exasperation that the company's servers were my second family. She wasn't entirely wrong. I knew every system intimately, every quirk, every undocumented workaround, every hidden backdoor solution to problems the executives in their high-level meetings didn't even know existed. The robust infrastructure I'd painstakingly built and maintained had survived 3 major acquisitions and countless fleeting technological fads that management enthusiastically embraced, only to abandon months later at great expense. Marcus Finch became my boss 5 years ago. He was young, ambitious, armed with a freshly minted MBA from some prestigious business school, the type who referred to our department as IT resources instead of acknowledging the actual people involved. He was full of grand ideas about streamlining efficiency and accelerating digital transformation, buzzwords that, in my experience, usually translated to doing significantly more work with significantly fewer resources. At first, I genuinely tried to help him understand our complex systems, the intricate history buried under years of organic growth, acquisitions, and necessary adaptations. I attempted to explain the potential pitfalls of his sweeping changes. "We need to future-proof, Arthur," he'd proclaim in meetings, his gaze sweeping right past me as if I were part of the aging infrastructure he was so eager to replace. 6 months ago, he brought in an external consultant named Julian Vance. Expensive suit, impeccably firm handshake, a Redwood University degree prominently displayed on his polished ProConnect profile. Marcus and Julian would huddle in glass-walled conference rooms, their voices dropping to conspiratorial whispers whenever I happened to walk by. The plans were clearly being made without my input. 3 months ago, I noticed my system access permissions being quietly, subtly modified. Nothing glaringly obvious, just small, incremental changes to administrative controls I'd held for over a decade. I could have protested then, raised a formal objection through the convoluted HR channels. But instead, I watched. I documented every change, every timestamp, every user ID involved. "You seem distracted lately, Arthur," Ella Lehner had said one quiet evening as we sat on the back porch enjoying the cool Colorado air. "Is everything okay at work?" I nodded, taking a slow sip of my beer, the familiar bitterness grounding me. Just changes, and nothing I haven't seen before. But these changes felt different, more personal, more targeted. I found myself being systematically sidelined in crucial meetings about system architecture. Emails regarding critical system upgrades mysteriously stopped, including me in the distribution list. Younger, less experienced team members were suddenly assigned to complex projects that would normally fall under my purview. Then I found it, a company-wide internal memo outlining sweeping modernization initiatives. It had never been shared with me, deliberately excluded from my inbox. The memo detailed a complete restructuring of the IT department under new leadership. The designated leader? Julian Vance. My long-held position, senior infrastructure engineer, wasn't even listed on the new organizational chart. I had been erased. That same unsettling day, while running a routine security scan, one of those meticulous background tasks nobody else seemed to bother with anymore, I discovered something else. Something far more disturbing. I noticed unusual recurring patterns in our secure financial software logs. Regular, substantial transfers were being made to a vendor I didn't recognize, Summit Consulting Partners. A quick, discreet online search revealed Summit Consulting Partners was registered just last year. Its listed business address led to a Courier Express Dropbox location downtown. The authorized payments had started small, almost negligible, but were steadily growing each month, escalating in frequency and amount. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just noted it down, meticulously copied the relevant transaction records and encrypted logs, and continued watching, gathering data silently. Sometimes, the quiet man in the corner sees everything precisely because everyone assumes he sees nothing at all. The morning after I was unceremoniously let go, I sat in my quiet home office, the familiar room now feeling like a cage. I stared blankly at the screen of my personal laptop. No jarring alarm clock had woken me at dawn. No stressful commute through Denver traffic awaited. Just a heavy, oppressive silence and the crushing weight of what had happened just 24 hours earlier. Ella Laner brought me a mug of strong coffee, placing it gently beside me on the desk without a word. After 19 years of marriage, ups and downs, shared joys and sorrows, she knew instinctively when I needed space to process. "I'm going to the grocery store," she said eventually, her voice soft. "Need anything while I'm out?" I just shook my head, unable to form words. After the sound of the front door closing echoed through the house, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my old wooden desk. I pulled out a small, unassuming flash drive, one of several identical drives I kept securely stored. Company policy, naturally, strictly prohibited removing sensitive data from the premises. But years ago, when the legal team had urgently needed a robust internal audit system designed specifically for tracking potential insider threats after that embarrassing data leak incident, I'd been crystal clear about the absolute necessity of secure, independent offsite backups. They had readily signed off on the protocol back then, eager for a solution, then promptly forgotten all the specific details I had implemented. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The files were heavily encrypted, a necessity I had insisted upon. I began methodically reviewing the archived files, internal emails I shouldn't have retained, confidential meeting minutes I wasn't supposed to have access to, and crucially, financial transaction records that normal employees would never, ever see. And there it was, laid out in stark, undeniable detail. A complete chronological history of payments made to Summit Consulting Partners. Nearly $1.8 million transferred over the preceding 18 months. The digital approval chain for these substantial payments led directly, unequivocally, to our Chief Financial Officer, Edward Thorne. I dug deeper, spending hours cross-referencing payment dates and invoice figures against known company expenditures until the underlying pattern emerged, clear as day. The payments to Summit Consulting Partners aligned perfectly, almost suspiciously so, with a series of legitimate software license renewals for systems utilized company-wide by Omnicorp. But the invoiced amounts were consistently inflated, sometimes by 15%, sometimes by a staggering 20%. The markups were just small enough individually not to raise immediate red flags in automated audits, but they were large enough collectively to add up to a very significant sum. I pulled up the official business registration documents for Summit Consulting Partners. Again, the listed owner was a Mr. Samuel Thorne. A quick, targeted search across various social media platforms confirmed what I already suspected deep down. Samuel Thorne was Edward Thorne's brother-in-law. They were systematically siphoning company funds through fraudulent markups disguised as legitimate business expenses, a meticulously planned, family-run embezzlement scheme. I leaned back heavily in my chair, the worn leather groaning in protest. I felt something shift inside me, a profound internal recalibration. It wasn't just anger anymore, though that simmered beneath the surface. It was something colder, sharper, more intensely focused. A sense of grim purpose. For 17 long years, I had diligently solved problems, meticulously fixed broken systems, and steadfastly protected the company's valuable data. I had been the reliable one, the steady, quiet presence who never caused waves, who always got the job done without fanfare. And for my loyalty, for my dedication, they had discarded me like a piece of obsolete hardware, tossed aside without a second thought. My phone buzzed on the desk, startling me. It was a text message from Liam O'Donnell, a bright junior analyst I'd personally mentored over the past 2 years. Sorry about yesterday, Arthur. Total BS what they did. Vance is already moving his stuff into your old office. I set the phone down without responding, my jaw tightening. Liam was a good kid, caught in the middle of something he didn't understand. The pieces of the puzzle now fit together with chilling clarity. Marcus and the CFO, Edward Thorne, needed me gone, urgently. They needed to remove the one person with the historical knowledge and system access capable of connecting the dots on their elaborate scheme before anyone else noticed. They probably assumed, arrogantly, that any potential evidence would simply disappear with me, that I was just some aging tech guy out of touch with modern finance. Easily intimidated and dismissed. They had underestimated me. Profoundly. I opened my secure email client and began drafting a detailed message addressed directly to the Omnicorp Board of Directors. Then I stopped, my finger hovering over the send button. No, too direct, too easily dismissed as the bitter, unfounded accusations of a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge. I needed leverage. I needed precision. I needed a way to expose the deeply rooted fraud that couldn't be ignored, couldn't be swept under the rug, couldn't be covered up by internal politics. I deleted the draft message and started making concrete plans. Tomorrow was Wednesday, board meeting day. The quarterly financials would be presented. Executive bonuses would likely be approved based on those falsified numbers. Perfect timing. I closed the laptop and walked slowly to the living room window. I looked out at the familiar, peaceful neighborhood where Alina and I had raised our son, where we had built our life together, brick by brick. For the first time since that cold, sterile meeting yesterday morning, a small, determined smile touched my lips. Wednesday morning, I sat patiently in my car, parked strategically across the street from Omnicorp's gleaming headquarters. I watched the steady stream of employees flowing through the revolving glass doors, briefcases and coffee cups in hand, oblivious to the storm brewing within. On the passenger seat beside me sat my personal laptop, logged into a secure, anonymous email account I'd created years ago specifically for security testing purposes. It was designed to appear as if it originated from an internal Omnicorp domain, but crucially, it wasn't tracked or logged in the company's main email directory. A ghost in the machine. At exactly 9:15 a.m., I initiated my first move. I sent a carefully worded email directly to Marcus Finch. The subject line read, "Financial irregularities, urgent review needed." The body contained a concise, factual summary of what I'd uncovered regarding the questionable payments to Summit Consulting Partners. I included just enough verifiable detail to be undeniably credible, but deliberately kept the crucial brother-in-law connection out of it for now. If Marcus was involved, as I suspected, he'd panic. If he somehow wasn't directly involved, which seemed unlikely, he'd be forced to investigate. Either way, his reaction would tell me something valuable. By 9:45 a.m., my personal phone rang, displaying Marcus's office number. I let it go straight to voicemail, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. His message, when I checked it moments later, was predictably terse and laced with poorly concealed anxiety. "Arthur, we need to discuss your email immediately. Call me back now." I didn't call back. Instead, I started my car and drove to a quiet coffee shop several miles away, choosing a table in the back corner with a clear view of the entrance. I set up my laptop and waited, sipping my black coffee slowly. Patience was a virtue I possessed in abundance. At 10:30 a.m., another email alert popped up. This one was from Isabella Rossi in HR. "Mr. Morgan," it began formally, "we have received concerning communication from you that potentially violates the terms of your separation agreement. Please cease all contact with current Omnicorp employees immediately and remember your binding confidentiality obligations. Any further communications of this nature may result in legal action against you." So that's how they intended to play it. Threaten, dismiss, isolate. Standard corporate intimidation tactics, except I hadn't signed any separation agreement. I had refused Isabella's proffered documents yesterday. At noon, I drove to the downtown branch of Mountain Ridge Bank and accessed my secure safe deposit box. Inside, nestled amongst personal documents, was another encrypted backup drive, older, but containing critical historical information I hadn't included on my more regularly updated offsite backups. Among these archived files were the original security protocol design documents I'd authored years ago. Crucially, these included detailed documentation logs tracking precisely who had access to which sensitive systems, and more importantly, when any significant permission changes were made. According to these immutable records, Edward Thorne himself had personally requested and been granted expanded, highly privileged access to the core financial approval systems exactly 18 months ago, right when the suspicious payments to Summit Consulting Partners began appearing in the logs. Back home in my quiet office, I found 3 more missed calls logged on my phone. Marcus, Isabella, and now, interestingly, Julian Vance. I hadn't expected the consultant to get directly involved so quickly. Very interesting indeed. I checked my personal email again to find an urgent message from Liam O'Connell. Arthur. The message read, filled with youthful panic. They're saying you sent some crazy email accusing people of financial fraud. Vance called an emergency all-hands meeting for the IT department. Everyone's talking. They're pulling all your old system access, even historical data access. We need to do our jobs. What's going on? Poor kid. Caught completely in the crossfire. I sent him a brief, cryptic reply. Don't get involved, Liam. Just watch. At precisely 3 p.m., my home landline phone rang. A number I hadn't used for business purposes in years, reserved only for family and close friends. I picked up the receiver but said nothing, waiting. Arthur, it's Edward Thorne. His voice was remarkably steady, controlled, betraying no outward sign of panic. Impressive composure, I had to admit. We should talk about your concerns. I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here. Is that what you call it, Edward? I asked, keeping my own voice level, devoid of accusation but heavy with implication. A misunderstanding. Look, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, becoming almost conciliatory. Transition periods are always difficult. If you have legitimate questions about company finances, there are proper channels, like the board, for instance. Like the board, I interrupted smoothly, letting the silence stretch for a beat. He hesitated. The board doesn't need to be bothered with routine operational details, Arthur. Why don't we meet tomorrow? Just you and me. We can clear this whole thing up privately. Sorry, Edward. I'm busy tomorrow, I replied evenly. Besides, I suspect the board might actually be very interested indeed in Summit Consulting Partners. And, of course, in your brother-in-law Samuel. The sharp, involuntary intake of breath on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Bullseye. You're making a very serious mistake, Arthur, he said finally, his voice losing some of its carefully constructed calm, now laced with poorly veiled menace. We can make this right. A generous severance package, glowing references, whatever you need. Think about your future. Goodbye, Edward, I said simply and gently hung up the phone. Within 10 minutes, Isabella Rossi emailed again. Suddenly, miraculously, my previously non-existent severance package offer had doubled. The email included an attached separation agreement requiring my absolute and complete confidentiality regarding all company matters, past, present, and future. They were scrambling now, desperate. But they still fundamentally misunderstood the situation. They still thought they were dealing with a simple, grubby extortion attempt from a disgruntled former employee. They had absolutely no idea what was truly coming their way. Thursday morning brought a chilling clarity and absolute confirmation. I'd spent most of the night meticulously combing through years of archived data, connecting seemingly disparate dots I'd previously overlooked in the daily grind of keeping the systems running. The Summit Consulting Partners scheme wasn't Edward Thorne's first foray into creative accounting. 3 years ago, shortly after he was promoted to CFO, another suspicious pattern emerged from the depths of the financial records. Significant consulting fees paid regularly to a firm called Aspen Advisory Group. Different name. Same insidious game. Grossly inflated invoices for consulting services that were either partially rendered, or in some cases, never rendered at all. I traced the business registration for Aspen Advisory Group. This one led directly to a Beatrice Thorne, Edward Thorne's wife. The woman was apparently the CEO of a company that possessed no discernible website, no listed employees, and utilized another virtual office address service. But the bigger, more damning revelation came when I delved deep into the encrypted email archives I had backed up. Marcus Finch hadn't just been passively aware of these fraudulent arrangements orchestrated by his superior. He had actively helped facilitate them. Emails clearly showed him approving related budget requests and potentially diverting attention. In exchange for his complicity, his IT infrastructure department consistently received generous budget increases, while other departments faced painful cuts and hiring freezes. Marcus, it turned out, had likely been brought into his director role specifically because the previous, more scrupulous director had started asking uncomfortable questions about certain opaque expenditures under Thorne's control. Even the high-priced consultant, Julian Vance, was tangentially connected. His consulting firm had been hired through a highly unusual, non-standard procurement process, bypassing the normal stringent vetting channels, likely approved directly by Thorne and Fetch. His real underlying role wasn't truly about modernizing IT infrastructure. It was about strategically eliminating the one person within the department who possessed the deep system knowledge and historical context to potentially notice the subtle financial patterns and expose the entire fraud. Me. The scheme itself was elegant in its brazen simplicity. Create legitimate-seeming vendor entities controlled by family members, approve grossly inflated payments for vaguely defined services, and quietly split the substantial difference. Since some actual services, like software licenses, were technically being provided, albeit at heavily marked up rates passed through the fake consulting firms, standard financial auditors scanning only for completely fraudulent, non-existent charges would likely miss the deception entirely. Over a period of roughly 3 years, my analysis indicated they had successfully diverted nearly $4.3 million of Omnicorp's funds. I gathered everything meticulously into a single comprehensive report. Detailed spreadsheets clearly showing the pattern of payment increases and timings. Official business registration documents irrefutably linking the shell companies to Edward Thorne's family. And copies of incriminating email exchanges demonstrating Marcus Finch's knowledge and active participation in the cover-up. Then I did something they absolutely wouldn't expect. I contacted William Hayes, a long-serving board member I'd worked closely with years ago during a critical security system implementation project. He was semi-retired now, living mostly in Aspen, but still diligently attended the quarterly board meetings in Denver. "Arthur Morgan," he said, his voice warm and familiar, answering on the second ring. "Long time no hear. Heard you left Omnicorp." "Not exactly by choice, William," I replied evenly. "I need about 15 minutes of your time. It's important." There was a brief silence on the line. Then Hayes chuckled softly. "This wouldn't happen to be about why Edward Thorne and Marcus Finch have been huddled together all week looking like they swallowed wasps, would it?" The board meeting yesterday was unusually tense. He paused. "Always figured you knew where the bodies were buried, Arthur. Where can we meet?" An hour later, we sat on a quiet bench in the Denver Botanic Gardens, miles away from the Omnicorp headquarters. The crisp autumn air felt clean. I handed him a sealed manila envelope containing a printed summary of my findings and a single encrypted flash drive. "That's everything, William," I said quietly. "Dates, amounts, bank transfers, business registrations, email trails, the family connections, it's all there. I'm not looking for my job back," I continued, meeting his sharp gaze directly. "I'm not looking for money. I just want the right people to know the truth." William Hayes studied me intently for a long moment, his expression serious. "Why come to me specifically, Arthur?" "Because you actually read the audit reports thoroughly," I replied without hesitation. "I've watched you in meetings over the years. You ask the tough questions nobody else wants to ask." He nodded slowly, thoughtfully, tapping the envelope against his knee. "There's an emergency board session scheduled for tomorrow morning. Finance committee review. Convenient timing for this, wouldn't you say?" He gave me a wry look. "Arthur," he said, finally pocketing the envelope securely inside his jacket. "If this information checks out, and I have little doubt it will, there will be extremely serious consequences. I'm counting on it, William," I said sincerely. As I walked back towards my parked car, the sun beginning to dip behind the mountains, my phone buzzed with a text message from Eleanor. "Someone named Julian Vance came by the house looking for you. Said it was urgent. I told him you were out running errands." "Everything okay?" They were getting desperate. "Good." That afternoon, somewhat surprisingly, I received unsolicited job offers via email from 2 major competing tech firms in the Denver area. Both were for senior leadership positions, significantly above my previous role at Omnicorp. Both offered substantial signing bonuses. Word had evidently gotten around quickly about my sudden, unexpected availability. I ignored them both, archiving the emails for now. This wasn't about finding another job. Not yet, anyway. It was about finishing what they had started when they showed me the door that night. Using secure credentials that absolutely should have been revoked immediately upon my termination, but due to Marcus and Julian's likely chaotic and sloppy IT transition process, inexplicably weren't. I accessed Omnicorp's central email server one last time, remotely and untraceably. I carefully scheduled a single, concise message to be automatically delivered to every single member of the board of directors at precisely 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, just before their emergency session was due to begin. The subject line was simple: before you approve Q2 bonuses, read this. Attached securely and encrypted was my full comprehensive report detailing the $4.3 million fraud. Checkmate. Friday morning dawned clear and bright over Denver. I sat calmly on my back porch with a steaming mug of coffee, watching the quiet neighborhood slowly wake up around me. No frantic rush, no looming deadlines, no demanding boss, just waiting. At precisely 8 a.m., my scheduled email delivered its digital payload directly into the inboxes of Omnicorp's board members. By 8:17 a.m., my personal phone began to ring incessantly. Numbers I didn't recognize, likely belonging to frantic board members' assistants scrambling desperately to reach me. I let every single call go straight to voicemail, listening impassively as the increasingly urgent messages piled up. At 9 a.m., the Emergency Finance Committee meeting would begin in the executive boardroom downtown. William Hayes would be there, my meticulously documented evidence held firmly in his hand. I could almost picture him watching the reactions around the polished table as my email was inevitably discovered and its explosive contents discussed. At 9:32 a.m., Liam texted me again, his message a jumble of shock and confusion. "Police are here, Arthur. Edward Thorne and Marcus Finch are being questioned separately in conference rooms. Julian Vance looks physically sick. What did you do?" I didn't respond. The wheels of consequence were turning now, exactly as I had anticipated, grinding slowly but surely. By 10 a.m., Omnicorp's general counsel called my cell. Unlike the others, I answered this one calmly. "Mr. Morgan, this is Olivia Carter from the legal department." Her voice was professional, carefully measured. "We need you to come in immediately to discuss certain information you appear to have provided to the board." "I'm available by phone right now, Miss Carter," I replied evenly. "This situation really requires an in-person discussion, Mr. Morgan." "No, it doesn't," I interrupted calmly but firmly. "Everything I know is already contained in that detailed report. Everything I have is already securely backed up in multiple geographically dispersed locations. If anything unfortunate were to happen to me or my family, additional complete copies automatically go to the Financial Crimes Unit and 3 national news outlets." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Mr. Morgan," Olivia Carter finally said, her voice now even more carefully measured, perhaps tinged with a newfound respect. "The board is taking this matter with extreme seriousness. They have already placed several executives, including Mr. Thorne and Mr. Finch, on immediate administrative leave pending a full external investigation. They would greatly appreciate your cooperation moving forward." "I have cooperated fully, Ms. Carter," I stated coolly, "by providing complete and accurate documentation of the facts. My part in this is done." After she hung up, undoubtedly relaying my message, I drove out to a quiet diner located about 20 miles outside Denver city limits. There was no sense in being too easily found today. Over a solitary lunch of steak and eggs, news alerts began breaking on the local Denver Business Chronicle website. Omnicorp Solutions executives under investigation for significant financial irregularities. No names mentioned yet, but that I knew would inevitably come soon. At 2 p.m., William Hayes called me directly. "It's a complete bloodbath here, Arthur," he said, his voice grim, but without preamble. "Edward Thorne confessed almost immediately once we confronted him directly with your irrefutable evidence. He's already trying to cut a deal, desperately trying to blame Marcus Finch for pressuring him into it. Finch predictably is denying everything vehemently and Julian Vance claims he was merely an external consultant with absolutely no knowledge of any financial matters. The board isn't buying any of it. We've suspended all three indefinitely, pending further investigation and likely criminal charges. The forensic accountants are coming in first thing Monday morning. Early estimates, he continued, suggest at least $4.5 million diverted over the past 3 years, possibly even more once they dig deeper. I nodded silently to myself. My initial estimate had been close. The board wants to talk to you, Arthur, William continued, his tone shifting slightly, about potentially coming back to Omnicorp. Not just to your old position, mind you. They're discussing creating a new Chief Information Security Officer role, reporting directly to the board itself. I had anticipated this possibility, considered it as a potential endgame, but still found myself somewhat surprised by the speed and nature of the offer. I'll think about it, William, I said noncommittally. Give it some serious thought. That evening, back in the comforting quiet of our home, I finally told Eleanor everything. The whole sordid story, from the abrupt dismissal to the discovery of the fraud, the meticulous planning, and the final execution of my plan. She listened patiently without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger and finally to a quiet understanding. When I finished, she simply asked, "So, Arthur, what do you really want to do now?" A good question. A very good question indeed. The revenge part, the visceral need for retribution, felt complete. The people who had callously pushed me out were now themselves being pushed out, likely facing serious criminal charges and public disgrace. Justice, cold and precise, had been served. But returning to Omnicorp, walking back into the very building, the very corporate culture that had discarded me so easily after 17 years of loyal service. Could I actually do that? Did I even want to? I need some time to decide, I said finally, looking into her supportive eyes. Later that night, I opened my laptop one last time and navigated to my otherwise dormant ProConnect profile. I posted a single cryptic message: never burn bridges. Sometimes you just need to let them collapse under the weight of their own greed. Within minutes, connection requests and messages from former colleagues began flooding my inbox. Word was clearly spreading like wildfire through the Denver tech community. The quiet, unassuming infrastructure guy had apparently brought down 3 powerful executives without ever raising his voice. By Monday morning, everyone would know exactly who they had underestimated so badly. Monday morning, I walked into Omnicorp's gleaming headquarters lobby wearing a tailored suit I hadn't needed or wanted to wear in years. The familiar security guard at the front desk did a visible double-take, his eyes widening slightly, then quickly printed me a visitor badge with newfound deference. "Welcome back, Mr. Morgan," he said, his voice tinged with respect I hadn't heard before. The elevator ride up to the exclusive executive floor was silent, carrying only me. I'd never had a reason to visit this rarefied level before. My domain had always been the server rooms and the trenches of the IT department. Now I was expected in the main boardroom. 10 board members, men and women in expensive suits, sat around the long, polished mahogany table. William Hayes gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod as I entered. The interim CEO, a woman who was previously the COO and always seemed vaguely uncomfortable around technical details, gestured for me to take a seat. "Mr. Morgan," she began formally, her voice tight. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice. The situation you've brought to light, well, it's unprecedented in Omnicorp history." I remained silent, meeting her gaze evenly, waiting. "The full extent of the fraud appears to be even worse than initially reported," she continued, shuffling some papers nervously. "The external forensic team has already identified nearly $5.2 million in diverted funds. Criminal charges are being prepared by the district attorney's office as we speak." Still, I waited, letting the silence hang in the air. William Hayes cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Arthur," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "the board has unanimously voted this morning to create a new executive position, Chief Information Security Officer. This role will have full executive privileges, significant autonomy, and a reporting structure directly to the board, bypassing the traditional management chain. We would like to formally offer you this role." I calmly placed a thin folder I'd brought with me onto the polished table in front of them. "Inside that folder, you'll find my conditions for accepting the position," I stated clearly. They are non-negotiable. The interim CEO opened the folder, scanning the single page quickly. Her eyebrows rose significantly as she read, full unrestricted audit authority across all Omnicorp departments, an independent board-approved budget, veto power on all major financial technology decisions and procurements. She looked up at me, slightly flustered. I nodded once, confirming. This is highly unusual, Mr. Morgan, she said, exchanging uneasy glances with the other board members. So was embezzling $5.2 million from the company coffers. I replied coolly, my voice level. It happened because no one with the authority and the access was watching closely enough. Now someone will be. The room fell completely silent. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their expensive chairs. You have until noon today to decide, I said, standing up slowly. I have other offers pending. As I turned to leave the boardroom, William Hayes asked quietly from behind me, Did you plan this all along, Arthur? Right from the start. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle, and looked back at him. I didn't plan on being fired without cause after 17 years of dedicated service. William, I replied calmly. Everything that happened after that, that was just me doing what I've always done best, identifying critical system vulnerabilities and implementing the appropriate security measures to mitigate the risk. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was the interim CEO. They had accepted every single one of my conditions. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office, significantly larger and with a much better view than my old cubicle. I was reviewing the updated security protocols for the upcoming fiscal quarter. The expansive view overlooked the entire Denver skyline, with the Rockies forming a majestic backdrop in the distance, a daily tangible reminder of how much had changed in such a short time. Edward Thorne had pleaded guilty to multiple felony fraud charges. In exchange for his cooperation against his former colleagues, he'd likely receive a reduced, though still significant, prison sentence. Marcus Finch was stubbornly fighting the charges, insisting against all evidence that he was merely an unwitting pawn, completely unaware of Thorne's complex scheme. His defense seemed unlikely to succeed. Julian Vance, the select consultant, had attempted to flee the country, reportedly to Brazil, but was apprehended and was currently being extradited back to Colorado to face charges. The stolen money, remarkably, had mostly been recovered by the forensic accountants, enough that Omnicorp avoided truly catastrophic financial damage and reputational ruin. My former IT team now reported directly to me, though I promoted Liam O'Connell to manage the day-to-day operational tasks. The kid had real potential, sharp and eager. He just needed someone to recognize it and give him a chance to grow. A soft knock at my open office door drew my attention. Eleanor stood there, smiling warmly. Ready for lunch, Mr. Chief Information Security Officer? She asked playfully. I nodded, smiling back, grabbing my jacket from the back of my chair as we walked together through the now much quieter IT department. Conversations paused briefly, heads turned, but the glances weren't filled with fear or resentment, but with a palpable, hard-earned respect. These people, my colleagues, knew exactly what had happened. They knew I could have easily chosen to destroy the company, to burn it all down in anger. Instead, I had chosen to save it, albeit on my own terms. In the elevator, heading down to the lobby, Eleanor squeezed my hand gently. Happy, Arthur? She asked softly, searching my face. I considered the question honestly. The raw, burning anger that had driven me during those first few intense days and weeks after being fired had largely faded, replaced by something else. What remained wasn't exactly happiness, not in the conventional sense. It was more like a deep, quiet satisfaction, a sense of completion, of accounts settled. I'm good, Elle, I said truthfully. I'm good. Outside, the crisp October Colorado sun warmed our faces as we walked toward the Timberline Grill, a nearby restaurant we both liked. My phone buzzed in my pocket with an incoming message notification. It was from William Hayes. Board just approved your requested security budget increase for next year. Unanimous vote. No discussion needed. I smiled slightly. A genuine smile this time. No arguments, no pushback, no lengthy justifications required. Just trust. Eleanor noticed my expression. What is it? Nothing important, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Just thinking about bridges. Some thankfully collapse under their own weight. I added, taking her hand as we crossed the street. Others, once they've been properly repaired and reinforced, become stronger and more reliable than they ever were before. I felt like I'd finally built this new bridge right. Built it to last.